Good evening, all you sluts. Thanks for coming tonight. You are sluts, right?
How to Be an Ethical Slut is a modern comedy meets cabaret in which the main character explores her sexuality and the complexities of being in a polyamorous relationship. Polyamory is a controversial topic in of itself, but the story is further explored through a young woman's intimate relationship with a married man who introduces her to a new view on love.
I'm in heaven.
Brooke McCarthy plays the protagonist in How to Be an Ethical Slut. She wrote this one-woman show based on her real lived experiences.
Can you define what an ethical slut means?
Yeah. I think being an ethical slut is just owning the sexual part, the sexual nature that you have. I think it's just this empowerment and ownership over your sexuality. I was in a queer theater history class when I was in grad school, and we were going back through just all the different queer theater makers in time and all these queer stories that were coming out over the decades. And while I'm watching all of these stories, I didn't really find any characters like me, anyone who was identifying as poly, or just even any relationship outside of monogamy, even in the queer community. It definitely was one of the first times I was really coming out about it, and I think the more I've done the show, the more I wrote it, the more I've produced it, the more I've just owned who I am.
Do you think a lot of people say negative things or make jokes about polyamory in not a positive way?
I think people either are like, huh, that's interesting, I've never thought of that, or they're like, oh, I couldn't do that, I'm too jealous of a person. Because I think as humans we all try to go, well, how could that work in my life? How could I understand that? And then the other side of that is polyamorous people or polycurious people are like, thank you for telling this story. We need to see more stories like this. So.
And then how does it feel getting that message?
You know, when I wrote the show, I wanted to write it because I wanted to be able to see me and people like me in stories. And so when other people who are polyamorous or polycurious come up to me after a show thanking me, it's just my people, I'm so glad that you were able to experience this and that you did have such a positive reaction, and that it is almost reaffirming in your own life that you can own yourself too.
I feel I was first introduced to polyamory through the very extreme side of the Mormon church, where it's shown in a very it's not empowering to women. How would you introduce it to people who sees it as inherently sexist concept?
It's inspired by my life, and I'm not perfect, and I had a lot of growing pains along the way of really being able to understand what polyamory is and how it can fit into my life. We're imperfect. We lie, we cheat, we are happy, we laugh, right? We have pain, we get jealous, we get angry. That's all going to happen, whether you're polyamorous or monogamous or not. So I think it's just really encouraging those people to just see the humanity behind the story, to understand that it's not black and white. There's no right or wrong. You can kind of live your life the way you choose to live it.
Apart from the polyamory theme, McCarthy chooses to show her intimate side on stage in the interest of being transparent about her identity.
Ourselves, it's mature, grown up before play. We don't have STDs.
Sharing intimate moments of life on stage is very exposing. I think being an actor in general requires a level of vulnerability to share any sort of emotional experience in front of people, because in our real lives we don't really do that very often. I believe that you have to grow by putting yourself in safely uncomfortable situations, and so the more I've done it, the more I've owned it, and the more I've owned myself. This whole journey has been owning my sexuality, my identity, my artistry.
Yeah, and I do think there is an educational aspect informing about polyamory, but also with there's a theme of STD safety and stuff.
Yeah.
Why did you want to include that?
We just are so awkward when it comes to talking about our sexual health with people that we meet in real life. I'm liking you, you're liking me, it's getting spicy, we're gonna do some things maybe, but how do you have that conversation? At the end of the day, we only get one body and one chance, so we really need to make sure that we feel empowered and okay to take care of ourselves.